Hello, good evening, everyone. My name is Dr. Nastasia Davis, and I am happy to bring to you a panel on My Black Beautiful Birth. I'm going to give everyone a few moments to join into the webinar, and we should get started in just a few minutes. Going to get started in just a minute as everyone filters into the room, and then we will go into our amazing panel. All right, good evening, everyone. Thank you so much for joining our panel, My Black Beautiful Birth. My name is Dr. Nastasia Davis, and I am the founder of the Perinatal Health Equity Initiative and your moderator for tonight's panel. Our organization is a partner of the Black Mamas Matter Alliance. If you're not familiar with them, I would highly suggest looking them up and following their organization. They're actually the originator of this week, Black Maternal Health Week, and it is running now in its 5th year. We are one of 2 New Jersey organizations who are actually partnered with the Alliance. The Alliance has been holding this event, as I mentioned, for 5 years and runs from April 11th through April 17th. There are tons of virtual events and in-person events across the country. So we are hosting our own week of events, but if you want to check out some other things, definitely go to the Black Mamas Matter Alliance website and you can get connected with other events. So this panel was designed with honoring Black joy in mind, celebrating the beauty in Black pregnancy and birth. Most of the narrative surrounding Black birth tends to focus on the negative, and it was very important to me personally to shift that narrative. As Black women, we have some heavy statistics associated with our births. What we know is that racism is the leading cause. As a New Jersey-based organization, I would be remiss if I didn't share our statistics. As a state, we rank 47th in the country for maternal health outcomes. In New Jersey, Black women are 7 times more likely to die from a pregnancy-related complication than white women. This is a terrible statistic and it must change now. I want to be clear that being Black is not a risk factor. 60% of these deaths are preventable. Birthing while Black means we need to be aware of these statistics, but these statistics should not define how we birth. We must be not as knowledgeable as possible about our bodies, our pregnancies, and our birth to best protect ourselves. It's incredibly important that we select providers who listen to us and believe us. More specifically, we know our outcomes are better when we have Black providers. This presentation is about knowing your options, from the providers you select to care for you during your pregnancy to how and where you choose to birth. You have rights and the ability to say no to things that you aren't comfortable with. The medical provider is the clinical expert, but you are the expert on your body. Surrounding yourself with a team of professionals that will advocate for you will help ensure that you have the birth experience that you desire. Now, with that, I am super excited to introduce our amazing panelists of Black women. And so I will begin with Michelle Gabrielle Caldwell. Michelle is the owner of Baby Please Birth Services Agency, serving New York and Pennsylvania, Maryland, and Georgia, with 6 doulas on her team. She is a certified birth doula with Bradley, the National Black Doulas Association, and DONA, in addition to a certified postpartum doula with the National Black Doulas Association. Likewise, she is a certified birth educator, teaching the Bradley Method, evidence-based birth, childbirth education class, and her own holistic childbirth course expressly for the Birth Center, at Birth Center of New Jersey, which she is the doula coordinator. Michelle is a breastfeeding peer counselor and soon to be a certified lactation educator. Michelle serves on the National Black Doulas Association Advisory Board, as well as the New Jersey Black Doulas Certified Doula Instructor and Doula Mentor, poppy seed health advocate, and board member of our organization, the Perinatal Health Equity Initiative. So I welcome Michelle, and I'm grateful that she is here today. Next, I will introduce Sakari Joseph. Born to two parents in the medical field, I guess you can say nursing has always been in the cards for Sakari. She started out her career as a young practical nurse and worked her way up. She received her associates in nursing from Helen Fold College of Nursing, where she graduated with honors. During her time as a registered nurse, she gradually ascended up the ranks from floor staff nurse to RN manager to assistant director of nursing at a short-term rehab facility. In 2020, she completed her BSN at Medgar Evers College in Brooklyn. This allowed her the opportunity to go back for her true passion, bedside care, as she became a staff nurse at one of New York City's largest emergency departments. In the upcoming months, she will start her journey to begin becoming a women's health nurse practitioner. With this degree, she plans to provide compassionate, individualized care to women of all ages, races, and backgrounds, and use her gained knowledge to educate and become an advocate for women. In a world where everything is a trend, Sakari is the one constant. From her love of the health profession to her empathetic nature as a driving force, she remains a steadfast in her abilities and passionate about the practice. Welcome, Sakari. Next, I will introduce midwife Nilly, as she is known in the birth world. She is an advocate for autonomous healthcare and birth experiences. Nilly, as featured by the New York Times, has helped families and birthing persons navigate their births during the height of the pandemic. Using her real-world experiences, Nilly founded Four Mother Birth Services, a practice that primarily services disenfranchised communities of color, providing home-based health and support services in New Jersey, New York, and Pennsylvania. When not assisting in deliveries, Nilly is a mother of three and a first responder wife and an avid animal lover and gardener. Welcome, Nilly. And we have two moms on our panel as well. Laura Porterfield, who is a mom who recently had a delivery at the Birth Center of New Jersey, and Layla, who is a pregnant mom who will be having a home birth. And Sakari will be joining us, Kadeen will be joining us shortly. I will read her bio, so it's up for her when she joins. Kadeen Ellis is the host and actress with credits on Tyler Perry's Bruh and Will Packer's Bigger. She completed her BA in broadcast journalism and a Master's of Arts in Speech Communications, Rhetorical Studies, and Performance Studies at Hofstra University, and is a former weather and traffic and entertainment reporter. She is co-creator and co-star of the Ellis's social media sitcom on YouTube and Facebook, which has garnered over 700 million views, and co-host of Webby award-winning podcast, Deadass with Kadeen and Duvall, which I love. And Kadeen is a season 2 alum of OWN's Black Love docuseries and has served as a keynote speaker in large conferences. And we welcome Kadeen when she is ready to join us, which should be shortly. So I want to start our panel off with talking about what brought you into this space, okay? So each of you come from either a professional background or a mother yourself. And so I would love to hear from you all about what brought you into this space. And whoever wants to start first can take yourself off of mute and go.
All right, I'll go. So as a nurse, I recently made the transition over to women's health and decided that that was going to be my path in life. in my career because of my experience recently with my sister's birth, who we'll talk about shortly. She did 2 at-home births, as well as 1 natural hospital birth, as well as 1 medically assisted birth. So it was a bunch of different experiences, and it kind of opened my eyes to the different side of birthing, and that it didn't have to be something where your water breaks, you go to the hospital and it just straps you down. It was pretty eye-opening, and it kind of made me want to educate women because it's something that people don't really know about. So I really feel like this forum will be educational for a lot of people to make sure that they understand their options and know that it's not only one route for people.
Awesome. Thank you, Michelle.
So I'll represent the moms.
Okay.
My name is Layla Little Omosawe again, and I am currently 6 months pregnant. I own a mental health and nutrition clinic for kids called Jump Kids Health. It's spearheaded from my love and compassion for competitive double dutch and traveling the world teaching competitive double dutch. And I realized that our babies needed more than just teaching them competitive double dutch. So I expanded, and we now provide one-on-one outpatient mental health therapy services as well as nutritional counseling. And with that, going into that realm, I started reading more about motherhood and more about our communities and how New Jersey is one of the most dangerous to have a birth as Black women. So when I got married in 2019, of course, I started reading more about natural births and home births because when I had my 10-year-old, I had no idea that that was an option. So I joined this organization called Melanated Moms, and I started reading more and gaining more information about home births. And then I got pregnant and I started researching where can I find a Black African American or woman of color midwife that can give me more education on home births. And luckily I found Lily. She's amazing. And now with progressing, I'm so happy with her. And so what we've decided, my husband and I, to do a home birth because we just feel like it's more comforting, it's more personal. And with my experience with the GYN last time, I just assumed that the first time mom that she would be just as excited as I was as my first birth, but I didn't get that. It was like, oh, hey, Layla, oh, see, if I see her,
Right.
it wasn't as personal as I thought. And then when I was in the hospital, I didn't see her until the end. So I'm like, well, who's all these strangers around me? This is my first time. I was a little younger. I was in my 20s, and I just didn't like the experience. So when I learned that I can have a midwife, I can have a doula, I can have a home birth, I was super excited. And I'm just super excited to have that and continue my experience with Dilly.
Awesome. We're going to expand on those things. You've hit on a lot of things that we're going to talk about today, specifically surrounding the choice of home births, access to midwives, and things like that. So thank you for opening up the floor to those conversations. Who would like to go next?
Okay, you called me. So
go ahead, Michelle. Sorry.
That's all right. So I'm here because, well, I'm part of the board, and I'm also a doula who's been working in this field for 17 years. And it's extremely important to me to make sure that people, it's one of my tenets, just making sure that individuals have informed consent, have understanding of their options, know that birth can happen outside of the hospital space, and that these are things that should be available to them. It's disheartening to hear, people who don't know that these things were even options. I had my son 23 years ago, naturally in the hospital space. Not to say that I didn't think about home birth. It was an option for me. I just didn't want it at the time. I didn't think I was going to be comfortable, right, with that. But it was wonderful the second time around because my second child was a home birth baby. So I certainly knew what those options were. Both were amazing, beautiful experiences. And so I've spent the last 17 years sharing that information with anybody who will listen, because I feel like it's so important to make sure that folks know that these are things they can do themselves, particularly Black women, because everything I heard, particularly, during my experiences were always, oh, why are you doing stuff that white people do? This is not for you. This is not meant for you. So no, this is what our ancestors did. So anyway, I'm gonna hold on to that thread. I'm gonna let everybody else introduce themselves, and I apologize, Nelly, your turn.
No problem. Kadeen, welcome. Thank you for joining us. We are just doing introductions about what brought us into our birth decisions. I know you had a few births outside of the hospital, so if you want to just elaborate on why you made those decisions.
Gotcha. Hi, everyone. First off, thank you. I'm happy to see all these beautiful faces, and thank you to everyone who's tuning in. Sorry for my tardiness, but I have 4 boys, a husband, and a lot of things juggling. So I'm happy to just kind of tuck myself away to have some lady to ladies chat right now. So my name is Kadeen. I have 4 sons. My oldest, Jackson, turned 11 yesterday, which I could hardly believe. Then I have a 5-year-old, a 4-year-old, and a 5-month-old. All of my birthing experiences were completely different. I would say the 2 that were the closest would probably be my last 2, my son Kaz and my son Dakota, who I had at home. My first pregnancy and labor and delivery was actually at a hospital with my OBGYN, who I absolutely adored at the time. She was just someone that I felt was super interested, invested in just me as a person, which was nice off the bat, and really had my best interest at heart. When I was 37 weeks pregnant with Jackson, there were elevated liver enzymes that she realized she found in my urine, I believe. And that prompted her to induce my labor because baby was a good size. So she felt like it was the right time to go ahead and try to take him. And then I experienced some complications after birth. I suffered a really severe cervical laceration, which I didn't even know was a thing that you usually hear about people tearing on the outside or the episiotomy that has to happen. But with Jackson's birth, I think it was just a combination of maybe a bad epidural job, pushing when I wasn't supposed to, just not being aware of my body or even knowing the strength of my body at the time that then caused this to happen. So right after I delivered him, I was rushed to the OR. I was in surgery for a while. I had to get 27 stitches in my cervix. Just to, like extreme blood loss. I was maybe like this close to a blood transfusion, and I was hospitalized for about 10 days after I delivered him just to kind of monitor everything. And I was thankful for the nurses and my OB that just kind of jumped into action and just saw something was wrong. My husband nearby, realizing that this didn't seem like a normal amount of blood loss for anyone, regardless of what the situation was. So between him and my mom, speaking up for me, because at one point they kind of left the room and they were doing other things because there's a lot of things happening. I just had the baby had his own issues, they're tending to him, so it always helps to have someone to advocate for you when you're in that scenario.
Absolutely.
So I would be lying if I said after I had my first son I wasn't a little traumatized and knowing that I did want more children, I didn't know when that would happen for me, just because I think I low-key just kind of had a little bit of a fear having to go through that again, though I did have a great experience in the hospital, nurses being super, super attentive once the issue did arise with Jackson. So I told myself the second time around, I just prayed on it and I said, God, please just give me the strength to maybe labor at home this time, so that way I can just naturally go into labor and things would kind of progress on its own. Little did I know that my pain tolerance, which I thought was like 0, my pain tolerance is actually really, really high. And I was in active labor and didn't know it. So with Cairo's birth, second, I was at home laboring as much as possible. And then I felt that final drop where I think there's a term for it. Maybe y'all can chime in. But when the baby finally drops into the birth canal and he's about to come, and we were in the car driving to the hospital, and I felt like his head was emerging in the car. And I told my husband, this is it. Leave the car at the fire hydrant, get the ticket, because I feel like this is going to happen. And that's when my sister Sakari took me up to triage, and within maybe 2-3 minutes, Cairo ejected himself from my body, and there was baby number 2. There was no other way to explain it. Right, Sakari, he literally just flew out. And it's indicative of his personality now, because he's very much here I am, y'all. So after that experience, I said, you know what? This probably means that if I was able to labor at home so long, have him in triage, let me try a home birthing experience this time around. Now, this was pre-pandemic, so that wasn't even a deciding factor for me. But I did want to also document this birth, which most hospitals don't allow. And I was also just looking for a different experience that kind of would encompass the family a little bit more. I think at that point, too, I kind of developed this inner badass, like, girl, you did that in triage and you labored at home all this time, so why not just
Absolutely.
trust your body? And I interviewed about 2 or 3 midwives in Brooklyn and finally linked up with Takia Ballard, who was my midwife for my third son. And that care was just so different than what I received from my OBGYN's office and the nurses there. Though they were great and everyone made me feel as if I was a priority, there's a bit of a family feel that I felt with my midwife. I felt like she was invested not only in me and my pregnancy, but my husband and his well-being, you know, my son and his well-being, how
Yeah.
they were doing with the pregnancy. There was like a total encompassing of everything that I didn't even realize could have potentially been affected with just pregnancy in general. So the overall care that she took of me and my family, I think was just, it was warm and fuzzy. And after my third, I did say to my husband, if my fourth is going to be like this, maybe I'll do it again, you know? But that was just a smooth, beautiful experience. It was right after Thanksgiving. At this point, my sister was there again because she's always, you know, there for her nephew's births. I had my grandmother in town from Florida. I had my in-laws. Everyone was just home. We were watching movies. I was laboring while at home. It was just a really beautiful experience. And my midwife was so in tune with my body that she just completely knew exactly when to move me from like the ball to the pool. And it was like a connection that we had that I couldn't even explain.
Mm,
But what I appreciated about her was that she spoke so much life into me as
yeah.
being a mom, as being a Black woman, of all of my ancestors who had done this several times, you know, years and generations before me. She's like, this is how we were born, you know, at home. Don't be afraid. I'm here for you. And she just really gave me this mindset where I embraced the pain, if that made
hmm
sense, because that
hmm
pain made me feel like I was getting that much closer to my baby and I was aiding
hmm
him in his removal from my body. And that's how I try to explain it, because that's the only way I feel like I can, because it was such a
Yeah.
very kind of surreal experience. And Kaz was born beautifully at home, safely. And it was great to have the care of her as well as her assistant nurse, my sister at the time as well, my mom, and just having all of the women who I value in my life kind of rally around me. That was a beautiful experience. And I experienced the same thing for my fourth. I pulled my midwife out of retirement. I'm like, girl, if I do this one more time, you got to do it with me. And this time it was at home here in Georgia. So we've since relocated from New York to Georgia. And
Okay.
again, another beautiful home birth experience. So although they were all pretty different in their own way, I think the one thing that I across the board experienced with my pregnancies and the care that I received is that I really tried to do my due diligence when it came to research, to being able to know different procedures, what was available to me, how to advocate for myself, even if I didn't know I could do it in that moment, having someone that I trusted, like my husband or my sister or my mom, to advocate for me. And that's typically what I try to encourage most women to do now if they are looking to become moms or be pregnant, is that you have to understand that don't just believe everything that's just told to you, or don't believe that, oh,
Yeah.
I'm just going to use this doctor or this nurse who's in my network just because. I mean,
Yes.
a lot of times it requires so much more, doing your own research and seeing what works for you, because every pregnancy is different.
hmm
With my last, I experienced about with postpartum preeclampsia, which completely threw me for a loop after having 4 pristine pregnancies and labors. 9 weeks, 9 days later, I'm hit with that. So that
Yeah.
kind of threw me for a loop. So that's always my message to women when they ask me about that.
Thank you. You've had such a vast experience with birthing, and I appreciate you sharing those stories. Before I get to the other two ladies, I want to just say that, like, remove your fear from the situation, right? I've had 3 children, all of which that I birthed in the hospital with epidurals. And that was before I had gotten into the birth space. And as I've gone into and learned things, I said, gee, I really wish that I wouldn't have been so fearful of having those experiences, that I didn't trust my body enough that I would be able to tolerate the pain. I just didn't think it was possible. And so I had the birth that I had, and I don't regret them in that way, but I do wish that I would have tried to do something a little bit different, having, you know, the experience and the option to do so. Nilly, we know you are a midwife. If you want to tell us about you and your work and how you got into this space.
Sure. So I started off firstly as a mom, experiencing the traditional, or at least what we would consider within the past 60 years or so, what is the traditional birth in a hospital. So all of my children were born in a hospital. And it was mostly because at the time, I really didn't know what options were available to me, or even how Michelle kind of mentioned, you know, if there were options, they weren't the options that we sort of gravitated to. So the support definitely wasn't there, either within my family or society or my friends or anything like that. After my second pregnancy, I was actually treated by a midwife. She had collaborated with an obstetrician. My pregnancy was deemed high risk because I was carrying twins, but otherwise, she treated me as holistically as possible, which I really did appreciate. She became actually my hugest support system during the later end of my pregnancy, since my twins wanted to basically come prematurely, and my husband worked in other states, and so she, during that actual delivery, she became my support person. So after that delivery, I was just very drawn to her, very drawn to how I could basically kind of vindicate myself, vindicate my experience to a certain degree, and I decided to jump into the doula work. I was very drawn to it, and I said to myself, well, you know what, since mine didn't go as planned or as expected, maybe I can sort of assist others in learning what their options are and trying to make their experiences more in line with what their preferences would be, you know. I did that for a few months and just almost immediately started midwifery school, mostly because I had a lot of experiences in the hospitals with you know, birthing persons, where I just felt like, you know what, this person doesn't need to be here. They don't need to be hooked up to all of this. What's going on here? So I was just, you know, I was gravitated almost immediately into midwifery. And from there, I started also almost immediately my clinical work as a volunteer in Brooklyn. At the time, it was the Brooklyn Birthing Center, and then doing home births with a licensed midwife as well. So.
Thank you. Thank you for sharing. Laura, I want to give you an opportunity to share your experience and how you you had a birth center delivery. And so the birth center resurgence is much needed. And I remember when St. Vincent's in New York had a birth center, and it was like the last one, and they closed, and it had been several years before we started seeing birth centers pop back up again, and they're so needed. It's a very different experience. If you want to talk about how you got drawn to the birth center and what your birth was like.
Sure. Thank you so much for putting this together. I'm here in this space right now because Michelle invited me to share my experience. She was my doula. I come from a sort of academic perspective. That's my day-to-day life. I live in my brain, but have practiced yoga for such a long time that I wanted to have an embodied, a deeply like connected experience. So I actually was in Wisconsin. I just moved to New Jersey last May. So I was in Wisconsin when I found out I was pregnant last year. And I had an OBGYN that I had for years. She and I had a great relationship. Despite that, one of the first, actually my first appointment after we found out we were pregnant at home, was one of those out of body experiences where they start talking to you and everything starts moving in slow motion, and all the noise drowns out, because she just proceeded to tell me all the ways that I could kill my baby by being plus size and over 35. Everything slowed, and I was like, this is my first appointment. Yeah. This is my first birth. And we have a great relationship. And she was sort of like under the standards of the profession, right? To tell me all of these risk factors and all of the ways that my pregnancy would be risky. And I was terrified, right? So I often say, like, I told anxious Laura to take a back seat when I was in grad school because I had mad panic attacks and had to be hospitalized. So she was like chilling in the back seat, you know, up until that point. And boom, she came back. She started driving again. Still with me, by the way. We're trying to get her to go back. But that just sort of like framed the beginning of my pregnancy. So when I got a job at Rutgers, so we moved. My husband and I decided to move across country, and was like, nah, I need to have different experience. Even though I had a great relationship with my OBGYN, my best friend, who's also a doula, had 2 birth center births, and sort of like what Michelle has said, you know, part of the other banter besides her experience was like, oh, that's some hippie-ish, you know what I'm saying? Like, we don't do birth centers. Aren't you afraid? Da, 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 da. And I kind of connected to my aunts, my grandma who had 13 kids at home, you know, to the people who I knew, in addition to my best friend. And the first step was to find an OBGYN in the area. And I found Dr. Pemberton, whose OBGYN practice in Union County here in New Jersey is connected to the birth center of New Jersey. So it was really serendipitous and like very beautifully connected. So I met all the midwives who could have possibly delivered me during my pregnancy here, and had to take a childbirth class because I wanted to give birth at the birth center, and that's where I met Michelle. And that's where my husband and I met Michelle. There was us and one other family, and the other family, the woman who was in the mother who was in the group was like 39 weeks pregnant. So she wound up only being there for one class. So it wound up being a private class between my husband and I and Michelle. So we wound up being able to ask and ask real deep, open questions. Michelle was like, ask me anything, you know, let's talk, like real talk. And for my husband in particular, who's, you know, an engineer by training and very like needs, he purchased, you know, the OBGYN textbook. He was like, I need to know all the things. We asked all the questions, but he was not really comfortable with something like a home birth. So the birth center was a nice sort of in the hospital and a home birth. I just have had dreams since, I don't know, I thought about having a child, about giving birth in water. I just knew that I needed to give birth in water. I had the water birth of my dreams. It was magical. You know, with Michelle's help, I basically was in labor for 2 days, and she was like, girl, I need to feel that pressure, that deep pressure, and then we could go. Kind of a similar situation to Kadeen. We got to the birth center, finally we're triaged. I was 9.5 centimeters dilated, ready to go. Got in the tub, and baby boy was like, here I am, you know. And he slid into home plate while I did my Black Widow pose in the tub. So it truly was a beautiful Black birth. And I, you know, all of the information Michelle gave us in the class helped me, but also my partner, also him feel very safe and like empowered. That's the word he used over and over again. Like he felt so empowered after doing those classes, which most birth centers require. And, you know, part of the success of, I think, my pregnancy and birth, also my pregnancy was very uneventful. So for her she gave me all those risks, but extremely uneventful pregnancy. Nothing of note whatsoever, and had like an almost 9-pound baby naturally.
Beautiful.
So,
that's stories about inducing early because you got a baby that's too big, right? We can't fit the baby out. We need to have a C-section, right? Our bodies are capable of doing these things. I want to highlight a couple of things that you mentioned. One is the childbirth education class, and I know Michelle can talk for hours on childbirth education. It's kind of her spiel, and I'm going to like steal her thunder a little bit, but just talk about the importance of having those take all the classes. There are childbirth education classes, breastfeeding classes, if you're interested in nursing your children. Don't expect that your body's just going to do things. You need to know what to expect. And so that preparation helps you to feel more calm because you know what's coming next. Everything isn't like a surprise to you.
Right.
And so definitely take the classes when they're available. And I know Michelle is very big on taking them outside of the hospital, right? Because the hospital teaches you how to be a good patient for the most part. And that's not always how you want to deliver. You want to deliver in your truth and what you want to do. And if that's not what the hospital wants you to do, they're not going to tell you that those are things that you can do. And so the community is kind of that space where you get to learn what can happen, right? And we'll talk more about these things in a minute, but like eating in labor, for example, right? The hospital is going to tell you, no, you can't do that. But the reality is you can do that, but they don't want you to. Go ahead, Michelle.
No, it's okay. You said everything for sure. But yeah, my major pieces are, I mean, and Laura knows, I do not accept doula clients unless you take a childbirth education class with me, because I understand the work that needs to be done, the work that I need to do as the doula, and I can't educate you and support you at the same time, in real time. I need to make sure that you know what your options are, what you want to do up front, and then my job is to secure all of that in the moment. I'm not going to tell you, oh, well, that's your perineum, right? We're giving you step-by-step information about the stages of labor, you know, in the moment. It needs to be upfront and solidified so that we have a better relationship going forward. And then, like Laura said, supporting the partner and making sure that they're comfortable with all the information. And, you know, Sharif lucked out because I'm an engineer too, so I knew exactly how his brain worked. I knew all the information that he needed, and that's why he felt empowered and safe in that space, because he had that information ahead of time. So, you know, I know so many people who say, you know, I have my doula, she's going to tell me everything. She needs to tell you everything before that labor, though. Right. So this is what I'm talking about. Signing up for those classes if you can. Make sure they're, like you said, out of the hospital spaces, because you don't want to be the complicit patient. And also, you want to know all of your options, and not just options, but all of your alternatives to the things that are laid out on the table for you.
Excellent point. And I'm going to segue just along as we're talking about doulas and midwives, and there are two roles that often get confused, and they are very distinct and different. They serve very different purposes. So if you could just define what a midwife does, Anili, and if you could then explain, Michelle, what a doula does and how you guys work together.
Sure. So a midwife is a healthcare provider. She would be more so in line in terms of what your expectations could be, similar to an obstetrician, in the sense that they monitor your health throughout your pregnancy, the actual delivery, and postpartum, depending on what path she took in education. So myself, for example, I would assist mom immediately postpartum, but then more so women's health, she would see a CNM, a certified nurse midwife, who specializes in women's health, or a nurse practitioner that specializes in women's health. In terms of how we operate during the actual delivery, the midwife is the clinical component. So we're not necessarily the support system, although we can support. We're more so focused on assessing and establishing mom and baby's health throughout the actual delivery. So that is our focus, really, having mom deliver the baby safely, and for mom and baby to have the most excellent health postpartum as well. So that's how I would describe, I would say, the midwife's role in terms of midwifery care.
Thank you. Michelle, if you want to clarify your role or the role of a doula.
Certainly, I would like to just piggyback a little bit on what Lily said, because I think it's important to also identify the difference between an OBGYN and a midwife, because a lot of people think they need both for specific birth outcomes. And it really depends, right? So if you're looking for a home birth, then you're set, right? You've got your CPM or your CNM who's able to assist you from prenatal care through the birth through postpartum. The OBGYN is usually the surgeon. So if there's an issue with cesarean section or needing, anything outside of that level of surgery, then the OBGYN is necessary. So I know in the state of New Jersey, there's the necessity for the CPMs and the CNMs to have this backup OBGYN in the just in case scenario, right? If there's surgery.
And CPM is a certified professional midwife.
And CNM certified nurse, right? So, and we also have the differences between who has rights in the hospital, who has rights at home, the whole gamut, all those policies, right? But when it comes to doula care, we don't do anything medical. So we're not doing vaginal exams, we're not doing blood pressures, we're not doing any of those things. Our main goal is to get you, one, informational support, emotional support, and physical support. We'll help you plan for the birth that you want, of the birth of your dreams, working through your birth preferences, working through your birth plan, securing all that information, being your major resource for all that, but we're also giving you continuous care throughout your labor. So we're not the person who just comes in and catches the baby. We're there the entire time. So if your labor is 2 days, we're probably going to be there for 2 days, right? So that's the major role that we have, is that continuous care, so that there is that continuity in that space of support, in addition to helping the partner as well, and any other family members who are in that space.
Yes, and so you can have a doula during your birth, but also postpartum as well, right? And you don't have to have both. You could do and or whatever
You can do
preference.
and or, yeah, I'm a birth and postpartum doula, so I can be there from soup to nuts. I'm also a fertility doula, so I can get to you even before you're pregnant. So really sort of helping you out with, best practices, what you can do to ensure, good conception, and that you're not waiting, forever. And you actually kind of not necessarily have to go through IVF or IUI or any of those things. If you start talking about what your desires are ahead of time, somebody can help you there too. There are also death doulas. There are also loss doulas, bereavement doulas. So we're all about support, no matter what's happening with you maternally, pre, post, after, and during.
Thank you. And as you're selecting who you would like to work with you, we always suggest making sure the people that you're working with are certified. You do want to verify credentials. Do not just assume that people are who they say they are, because unfortunately that can lead to harm. And so you do want to make sure that someone who is claiming to be a doula has in fact finished their training and has in fact certified with the number of births they're required to have as a result of that training. There are also community doulas, and in New Jersey, we were recently granted, well, this is for any doula, but Medicaid reimbursement for doulas. So if you have Medicaid and you want access to a doula, you can go onto the New Jersey Medicaid website and search to find a doula who's credentialed to have that accepts Medicaid that can cover the cost, because there is a cost associated with having a doula. They're unfortunately not a free service. They are professionals and need to be paid. But we do have a pilot program that began in New Jersey that allowed for Medicaid reimbursement. So you can have Medicaid cover the cost of your doula. I want to transition to father support. I think that has come up quite a bit about the partner and the father and the birth space. And I would like to hear your experiences as far as how that partner navigated with you in the birth process and how beneficial that was for you to have them included.
Who did you want? I don't know who you wanted to jump
Whoever wants to talk about, you can go ahead, Kadeem.
Okay, cool. Yeah. So my husband is a chronic, he's a Googler. He is if I don't know something, I'm going to figure it out. I'm going to find out. And a lot of things that happened with me, even just during the course of my pregnancies, he was speaking about it from a place of education before I even kind of realized what was happening. So that was nice to have a partner who was so vested, not only in my health, but of course the health of our baby, and who was really connected to the process the entire time. You know, it was one of those things where, you know, if I was feeling something in particular, he would be the one to call the doctor ahead of time, or he would hit my midwife up and be like, Takia, Kadeen is experiencing XYZ. For example, my whole postpartum preeclampsia situation that happened 9 days after I delivered Dakota, you know, my midwife stayed with us when I hit 36 weeks, and she lived with us until I delivered at 38 weeks. My last baby boy was the longest pregnancy I'd had, because prior to, my other 3 sons came somewhere along the 37-week line. So 38 weeks, you know, he made his debut. And she stayed with us, I think, until about maybe 2 weeks after, maybe 10 days, long enough to make sure that I was okay, that the baby was good, and we were on the mend. And then this whole thing happened. So I had a persisting headache that just wouldn't be cured with any kind of over-the-counter Tylenol, Motrin. I tried a couple different things, and I just kind of chalked it up to sleep deprivation, nursing around the clock, just everything that comes with postpartum life. But this persisting headache is something that kind of sparked him to say, I don't know if this sounds really normal, but let me contact Takia. Me feeling like, I'm going to sleep it off. I can handle it. I had these babies at home. Like, I'm good.
Mm-hmm.
You know, little did I know that he was having that conversation with her, you know, unbeknownst to me, and in no way of ever me feeling like they were talking about me behind my back kind of a thing,
Right.
but it was really just out of genuine care, and wondering what was happening. So together, my husband was getting ready to go to the Soul Train Awards in like 3 days. And he was having his fitting at the house, you know, so the stylist came with all his clothing and stuff. And, you know, he couldn't even focus on what was going on there, because he was just so, you know, dead set on me having the conversation with my midwife, her telling me, I think you need to go to the ER. And then me rebutting, oh, I can just go to the OB in the morning, though. It's not a big deal. And she's like, no, when it comes to blood pressures, you should go. And then I contact my sister, Sakari, and I'm like, what do you think about this whole blood pressure thing? Because it's a little high. My feet are swelling. I have a headache.
You're
I'm
trying to
good.
get me to say, like, no, it's fine. Don't worry. Yeah, right.
Yeah. And then she was like, she said, it doesn't sound good, according to what I know. And of course, she goes back to like her books and stuff, because she's fresh out of school, still trying to learn herself. And she's kind of like, I don't know. Takia never really overreacts with anything. And if she's kind of adamant about you going to the ER, I think you should. And that's when my husband, in the middle of his fitting, was like, forget this. Like, this is more important in this moment. Let's get you to the ER.
Mm-hmm.
And thank God he did, because once I hit triage, my blood pressure was like 178 over like 100. It was crazy. And thank goodness for that. So I say that to say, having a partner who is super, super vested in your health, in your well-being, who can kind of see things, because they tend to know you the best, because they're with you on a day-to-day basis. So they know he knows what normal Kadeen looks like. And he even knows what normal Kadeen postpartum looks like, because it had been the 4th time around.
Mm-hmm.
So when he noticed that things were off, thank goodness he did, between him, my sister, my midwife, my mom, who's also a nurse, retired now, but put the electric blood pressure cuff on and was like, oh, this thing is clearly broken, because there's no way, you know, you, who's normally a 120 over 70 person all the time, there's no way that it could be 169 over 98. No way. Then she gets her manual blood pressure cuff, and it's coinciding. So, you know, husband, family, the support is always just so amazing. And I feel like the more that they know, the more they can also kind of be that eye on you outside of you, because sometimes you just don't see those things. Or if you're like most Black women tend to be, we gonna be all right. It's okay. I'm gonna take a nap.
Sweep it under the rug.
we'll just sweep it under the rug and continue moving on like everything is fine, not knowing that slowly we literally could be dying. Like when I got to triage and spoke with the OBGYN who was on duty at the labor and delivery unit, she pretty much was like, Miss Ellis, like, thank God you came in, because some women go to sleep and don't wake up, or they have a stroke and don't even know it. So that made me really emotional in that moment, because I was just like, wow, here I am just thinking I'm just not trying to be a bother to everyone around me, just kind of dealing with things, not knowing that they could have been potentially life-threatening. So thank God for my husband and my family, who are always vested in my health.
Thank you for highlighting those things, because that headache is probably the number one thing that you should recognize as impending preeclampsia, and it can happen postpartum, and that's what happened in your case. Many people think that preeclampsia is only part of your pregnancy, and it often does happen during pregnancy, but it can happen postpartum, even if your blood pressure was fine your entire pregnancy. And that swelling is a symptom. The swelling that we get in our legs and feet, sometimes that's a little bit normal, but when you start to have swelling in your face, swelling in your fingers, those are areas that are not supposed to swell. And so when you start to see those changes, you definitely want to report. Don't just ignore it as it's a normal thing for pregnancy, and don't allow providers to tell you these are normal things of pregnancy either. If you are feeling like something is off, insist that it gets checked out. And if they aren't willing to check it out, then I request that they document in my chart that I came and saw you for this reason and you refused to treat me. Usually when you say that, because the medical record is a legal document, they're not going to write that in the chart, right? So they're going to do what they need to do. Sometimes you have to force them. And we shouldn't need to do that. And that's kind of why we're having this conversation, so you know what's going on, so that you can advocate on yourself. In an ideal world, people would just take care of us as Black women the way they're supposed to. But unfortunately, those are not our circumstances. We have to know everything, and we have to be our own advocate. And that's why doulas, midwives, Black professionals are so important in the protection of us during our birth space, so that we can not just survive our births, but thrive after delivery. It's very, very important. So thank you for sharing that, Kadeen.
Absolutely. One really quick too, after when I did end up in the hospital, I was in the labor and delivery unit for 2-3 days on magnesium sulfate and all that. And there was one particular nurse that I'll never forget her to this day, because I feel like in these experiences, you always meet that one person that you're just like, thank God for you, because if you weren't there, who knows what would have happened. But she was a sister too, and she was like, girl, we're gonna get rid of this headache for you. Because even while I was on the drip, that in itself is such a nasty drug. It makes you feel so loopy and groggy and everything. This headache would just not let go. And in that moment too, I had the baby with me. They allowed me to keep him. So in being groggy, my husband was close by, just so that I was still able to nurse while being in the state. And she's like, we're going to get rid of this headache. She said, I just started this shift right now. I know you've been dealing with this headache for the past 17 hours or 16 hours at that point. And I was really at my wit's end. And she was able to stagger my medication, giving me, I think it was like Tylenol and Motrin in a certain increment of time that completely got rid of this headache. I could literally kiss her if I see her to this day, because I just felt like she kind of understood. And we spoke in our way. And I was like, sis, listen, like whatever they've been giving me is not working. We have to do something. She's like, girl, I got you. Like, this is what we're going to do. So, let's give a shout out to the nurses who sometimes don't even get the accolades that they need and they should have, because, you're always going to say, oh yeah, the doctor, the OBGYN did this great. The midwife did that great. But those nurses sometimes come through for you on the clutch when, you may get one person on a good shift or a bad shift, whatever, but when you can really relate with somebody, I think it's an amazing thing.
Thank you, Sakari, Kadeen. And that is a great segue to Sakari, because the nurse's role in this space is often not talked about. And we really would like to get your perspective on the nurse's role in the Black infant mortality, the current state of where we are.
Okay, well, I don't work in labor and delivery, so that's something I do not have much education on, but I did work in the ED, where I saw many of women come in, pregnant, not pregnant, but mostly the pregnant women that are just not educated. And I think that was the major thing with nurses. Doctors just come in and they do their thing and they leave. And that was the most disheartening thing for me as a nurse, and especially as a Black woman, to see people leaving like, I still am not feeling well. I'm still not feeling well. I'm still feeling this way. I'm still like, that's not being heard. And I think that's what made me want to be a women's health nurse practitioner, because I feel like there's so many people out there that do not know. And it's not because they're not willing to learn. It's just that they don't have the resources, or they're not exposed to the resources that will educate them on these type of things. So as a nurse, I feel like it is our duty to educate these people, to let them know, to establish that rapport with people, because we, as Kadeen said, we are the people who interact the most with the patients. We're the ones who actually feel what they're feeling and empathize with them. And I feel like we never get recognized often in any field, whether it's women's health or any field for nursing. We just don't get the recognition. Of course, we got the recognition during COVID, but we don't get the recognition altogether for being that force that are able to communicate, educate. Those are major things that we do. Educate, assess. Those are the main things that we do as nurses, that we're taught to do, and that's what the NCLEX is about, and all those type of things. But we don't get the recognition for those things that we do. Yes. So I think for me, moving forward, I want to be able to have a place where people can learn about these things, because people don't know. Like, I had a lot of, especially Hispanics and Black females come in, and things are happening with their bodies that they just don't know. And like, unfortunately, a lot of them had miscarriages, and I feel like I never knew how frequent that was, but that support was not there for them. It's just like, oh, this is happening, bye. Like, it's just so many things that happen within the female body that they don't know about, and they're not supported, especially throughout this process. So it's definitely something I want to change.
Thank you. And you are on the track to becoming a women's health nurse practitioner. And I want to just uplift a couple of things with that. One is New York just passed legislation for nurse practitioners to have full practice autonomy. New Jersey is right across the river, and we, for some reason, can't get there. But I want to just elevate kind of what that role is, because I hear that back and forth often. If patients have the option to have a nurse practitioner, it's kind of looked at as less than the OB, and they would prefer to have an OB instead. But I'd like you to kind of highlight what nurse practitioners do and how that's such an important other opportunity for care.
So nurse practitioners are similar to the OB, but what we don't do is we don't deliver babies, but everything from the span of women's health, from STD testing to reproductive health to just everything in terms of that, we take care of, and we can establish. But major things with us is education. That's why I'm so involved and so passionate about it, because I feel like women, especially young women, they don't know these things. And as NPs, we're taught to know the process. Yes, we can teach you we can do your pap smears, we can do your STD evaluations, we can do your UAs, we can do those type of things. However, I feel like we are, I guess, made to educate more so on the reproductive health, all the things that people don't talk about, more or less. Yes. The common things that people don't know.
So if you are looking for care, you can choose to have a midwife, you can choose to have a nurse practitioner. Having an OB/GYN is not your only option. And so don't look down upon the education and credentials that those other professions have. The outcomes of care from both advanced practice nurses and midwives are actually proven to be better outcomes than that of with an OB. So think about that as you're pursuing and thinking about care, your care options. There were a couple of questions that came in on the panel that I just want to ask about doulas.
Natasha, I'm sorry, before we do that,
yes,
one of your questions was regarding partners.
Yes.
And I know Kadeen got to talk about her husband. I know Laura wanted to speak about her.
Please, husband. Laura, I'm sorry. Go ahead.
Oh, it's okay. My husband was like right there the whole time, asking all the questions. He's actually here sitting right next to me too, and speak for himself actually, particularly about the role. I think the birth education classes and having the doula sort of advocacy team helped me and helped him during the process. So I'm gonna slide it on over.
Yeah.
Hi, Sheree.
Hello. Yeah, so partner support, super important. I think a lot of times as a guy, when I was doing a lot of the researching, I couldn't find a lot of stuff that I spoke directly to me, especially as a Black man, in terms of like supporting someone through pregnancy. So when we started investigating, things about a natural birth, it was a bit of a mystery to me. So I wasn't sure. I just had a lot of questions. But one thing I loved about the process was that it just gives a lot of specific information. So I felt really empowered, that I just knew a lot more. And I feel like that's something that a lot of my other friends that, went through more traditional births didn't have. And they felt kind of like they were just off to the side, just like, can I, when do I jump in, So I really, really enjoyed being empowered, and just the we're in this together like kind of thing. Like, it was really, really beautiful thing. And I just feel happy that I was able to be a more active participant in the process, which is something that I don't think a lot of people consider when they think about partners. They just think, you just kind of chill and make sure things don't fall apart, and there is some of that, like, don't get me wrong, but like being like a full part of it, I think is very important, and made me feel really good about it.
Thank you for uplifting that. And I think it's important to mention that in the birth space, a lot of Black men are present, but they are not spoken to as if they are even in the room at all. And so that wasn't your experience. You felt like you were included in the process. Do you feel like you needed to make that like a point to be included, or were you naturally just included in the process?
Oh, no, I think I was probably a little hesitant, and I was like told, like, no, you have to be a part of this.
Michelle was like, what you doing?
Well, to be fair, because my thought was, well, I'm not the expert, right? So how can I contribute, right? But as I said, as I got more information and felt more empowered and felt like, hey, I have like a hand in this, like, even though
you know her, you love her, you made this baby together. Why would you not be part of this process? Why would you not have a say so?
No, I definitely hear you, but I'm also going against my 42 years of societal pressure.
It's not you sitting in a waiting room smoking a cigar.
Yeah, exactly. So I mean, it was just, I'm just happy that we made that decision, and that, I was able to, be an active part of it. And now, when I look at our son, I could think about, like those times,
being there. Do you have any words for other Black men who might be hesitant? Like anything that you would say to them, to encourage them to be part of the process?
I mean, really, it's like, just jump in, it's one of those things where, like, you just have to make a decision that you're going to go do it, and then just do it, like, there's no setup, there's no like way you can 100% prepare for stuff. You just gotta, I mean, definitely do some background research that you can, but nothing's going to prepare you 100%. You have to go in, do it, and just have trust in your partner, and like and like a trust in the other parts of the medical team, like doula, midwives, all that stuff. Everybody wants everybody to succeed. Like, it's not like a battle, like, oh, like, I don't want like the husband to butt in because it's going to take away from my part or something like that. Like, it's all,
everybody has a role to play.
If you have the right team, I will say, and because I can imagine things being combative in a hospital setting if you don't have the right team. But I had a midwife, I had our amazing doula, who was also our childbirth educator, and we had a relationship by that point that was established, where Michelle was like, no, you, dad, you need to be like, while she's doting on the baby, she's going to be birthing this placenta, and this is where a lot of stuff for Black women happens. You need to be prepared to be paying attention to the delivery of the placenta, and so just all of that information. He was actually in the tub with me, behind me birthing, so a lot of those things he didn't even think he could do. Into that societal conditioning that the daddies are just there to like clip the, to cut the cord, and that's it. That was really antithetical to him, like being completely engaged and knowledgeable about like what station to be listening out for when I was triaged, and if I was out of it, to be like, does she need a cervical exam right now? Because that was something else that came up. So all of those were parts of the process that I was able to like release emotionally, because I knew he was going to be there and Michelle was going to be there. I had a midwife that I knew as well, but like them two were like my hardcore team. And I think they were communicating way more, kind of like Kadeen was talking about, you know, your husband talking to your midwife. They were going back and forth when I was just in the shower for 2 hours, you know, during contractions. So that part of the process, I think, was really, it allowed me to just focus on like writing my surges, you know, until I could get there. I didn't have to
focus on what you're working on.
all the minutia. I was just like, I'm writing these surges, and then he's gonna drive me once Michelle says it's go time, you know. So I think
thank you for
This
sharing.
guy here heard baby talk and he got nervous. On me.
Val, welcome.
That was like perfect timing. Made a quick cameo, and I was letting them know that, or I was telling him that we were talking about the dad's role and the father's role in in just like the whole process and what that was like. Because I told him how super supportive you were with all of them and how you knew everything happening to me before it happened. So if you don't mind, I brought him on too, so he can.
No, absolutely. Go ahead.
Hi guys, thank you for having me. I'm definitely not here to mansplain birthing, because this is really not what we do. But I know for a fact, when I watched Kadeen go through having our first son Jackson, and being in that moment where, you know, everyone had left, they took Jackson because Jackson was born with a club foot, and I looked at my wife and she looked gray, and I was kind of like, hey, you know, are you all right? And she was just like, yeah, I'm just a little tired. Then I decided to go down and look in between her legs, and I noticed that she was gushing blood. Like it was like Texas Chainsaw Massacre.
Wow.
And I remember asking her mom, I remember saying, hey, is this normal? And her mom is a nurse, and her mom was like, no. So then I ran to get the doctors, and this wasn't even the first time. In our whole birthing experience, the first time, I had to continuously advocate for my wife. Anytime she said something, they were trying to convince her that she wasn't feeling what she was feeling. And I was just tired of people telling my wife how her body was feeling. Right. So once we went and got the doctor, and the doctor came back in, and the minute the doctor came back in, and we had a great OBGYN. She was amazing. But she was like, prepare the operating room. They took Kadeen, left. No one said anything to me. And I remember my mom grabbing me and then waking up. And then my mom said that I had blacked out, and they had to calm me down because I was upset. Yeah, I was upset. I was under the impression that, is this going to be one of those times where I have my child, but I don't have my wife anymore? And I remember saying a prayer, and I said, God, if you could bring my wife through this, I promise you, I will honor her and my son to the fullest, but I am never having any more kids. Like I had already made that decision with God that I didn't want to put my wife through it. So we had a 5-year gap between our first and our second, because both of us were afraid that childbirth was going to be this traumatic experience. And then my wife looked at me and said, you know, I think I want to try again. And I was like, you want to do that again? And this is why I always put the power of childbirth in, like women are just powerful beings. You know, we always talk about equality, right? And we always say, are we equal? Are men equal to women? Men cannot create life, right? So to me, there's no equal to that. Like women are powerful beings because they create life. You know, if you take a planet full of women and male sperm, you could create a whole new planet of people. But if you take a planet full of men, we can't do anything. We'll never be able to recreate life. So for that reason, when my wife said to me she wanted to have another child, I thought it was my responsibility to be as educated as possible so that I can be an advocate for her. Not to be in place of her voice, but we do understand the misogynistic views that happen in hospitals and the patriarchy. At least if I'm there to put my foot down and say, no, listen to my wife, because at least they'll listen. Yeah. And in doing that, I realized how much of a business the birthing process is. Oh, yeah. And how much the business takes away from the actual care of mothers, especially Black moms. And at that point, I was like, yo, we're not going to do it the way we've been doing it. And she was like, what you mean? I was like, listen, we're not going to do the epidural because we had a horrible epidural experience. We're going to listen to our OBGYN, but you and I are going to do our research and get this done on our own. We're going to labor at home, and we're going to be prepared for everything that happens. And then we were blessed with my sister-in-law, who's a nurse, who, when I tell you, there's nothing like having a family member who knows medicine
Yeah.
in times like these, that you can call on someone that you trust wholeheartedly.
Mhm.
Having my sister-in-law and my mom in the room was like the greatest, because they're professionals. They're educated on this.
Right.
I don't have to guess, and no one is going to say to me, oh, you don't know because you didn't go to school. Yeah, maybe I don't know, but my sister-in-law knows and my mom knows. When my wife says that this is what it is, you guys need to listen. And I think it's important. You know, it's important for men to realize that we don't have to sit on the sidelines and just wait. Because I remember even watching the Cosby Show, it was the father sat outside, the moms went into the room, and the father just waited there and just, well, what's happening? I don't know. I'm waiting to find out if I have a boy
He
and
kept
a girl.
saying, do I gotta boil the water? Who boils the water?
Yeah. It's like, what do I do?
that.
But I also learned that so much of the birthing process comes from just my care. You know, me loving on my wife and being present just produced oxytocin, and allowed the birthing process to move forward. So there were moments where I just knew that she needed me to hug her and kiss her and hold her and just get her mind off of everything else that was going on. And that's my purpose as a dad. I'll never sit here and say that my purpose is as much as hers, because I can't be the vessel of life, but I can be there to make sure that as she's being the vessel of life, I can make sure it's as smooth as possible and protect her in every aspect. So
thank you for that, babe.
Thank you. I want to thank you, Deval and Sharif, for flipping that narrative of the absence of Black fathers in this space, that they don't exist and that we are husbandless people. There are fathers who are involved, who care on their children, who are present and available and do that work. And so I appreciate you both for showing the visibility for that and the importance of both of your roles in that space. So thank you. On that note, thank you. Is there anything else?
I wanted to just add something that both of the fathers were talking about. And obviously this is Black maternal health, and we're discussing the importance of the mortalities and morbidity rates. And there was a survey done that actually went out to like all pregnant persons and asked one question: what are you afraid of?
I know exactly what you're about to say.
White women were afraid of pooping while the labor, but Black women were afraid of dying. So the severity of this is just why we need Black Maternal Health Week, why we need these conversations, why we need to keep spreading the word and education, Sakari, right? All of this stuff is so imperative, because no, it's not just, I might be concerned about pooping, but we don't care. We know.
Right. No, people think we care. No one actually cares if that happens. Like, it's so normal that we don't even think about it.
We're super happy because we know that that's time.
Right.
We know it's time for the baby to come. But I just wanted to put that into perspective for anybody who is here who doesn't understand why we're having this or what this is for. The fears are real, and we aren't given the options to come out of the hospital, to do things naturally, to go into spaces where we have a little control, a little more empowerment, and a little more understanding of what our bodies are capable of doing. That's where I wanted to just really kind of pull all of that in, because you guys are, thanking you so much for being there for your wives, for sure. My husband teaches childbirth education classes with me because of this, because he wants to make sure that Black men are heard, and that that you're not seen as this older in the room who's going to cause trouble and they're going to need to call security on, right? It's all about making sure that you know the terminology as well, right? Even if you got to text somebody real quick to get it, you know it. And that you're able to have those real tangible conversations about advocacy and supporting your wife in birth.
Can I just jump in one question to one thing? I had a couple friends who had babies over the past year, and the first thing I told them when their wives got pregnant was, you have a responsibility to be there from conception, not when the baby's about to be born,
Thank
but you need to be at every
Yeah.
doctor's appointment. You need to be at everything that she's going to, because once they get used to seeing your face, your voice will be more accepted. I go into these, when we used to go to these appointments, I'm asking questions. And it just lets them know, well, her husband is going to be present. So be prepared when that day comes
Right.
That's
that
right.
he's going to be there. But also, it put my wife at ease. Like, I learned
For
so
sure.
much about the pregnancy process. It wasn't just even about the birthing. It was just understanding that her body physiologically is going to change. Her mind is going to change. And I have a way of helping that by just being present. And sometimes being present for my wife was just taking the kids and going away. Like, that was present enough. You know, like,
Yeah.
we had three kids at the time. She needs time to herself. I can look in her eyes and say, uh-oh. Hey, you 1, 2, and 3, come with me. Let's go downstairs. Let your mother do what she needs to do. And that in itself just creates a space, a sense of peace for women who are dealing with pregnancy, because men are not taught this. And I don't want to sit here and man bash, because I didn't know any of this. I had no clue. Like, when I think about my first time being a dad, I was terrible during the pregnancy process because I thought my job was to provide financially. So I was gone working 14, 18 hours a day so I could make as much money, but I wasn't there emotionally. I wasn't there spiritually. And then I realized after that, like, I really dropped the ball with my first pregnancy. And then that's when my second and third pregnancy was better. And people would make comments like, wow, DeVal is so over the top. And I'm like, you see, when you see a black man loving on his wife or being at everything, it's too much because you're not used to it. But I didn't let that deter me, and I'm gonna let every black man I know, don't let that deter you. You have to be there at everything. When she was going to, what was the test you had to do to get the ink put in your fallopian tubes?
Is it the HSG or HC? I had blockage in my tubes. I forget the acronym, like HCG or HSG.
I went for that, and they were like,
I found I had blockage in one of my tubes.
They were like, why are you here? And I was like, well, my wife is here.
My wife.
Yeah, right.
Like, why do I even have to answer this question?
Right.
You know, like, but that's what
It's a
black men
stigma
have.
that we're not supposed to have a partner with us anyway, right? So that's another thing. You're a black woman and you're pregnant. Oh, do you know the baby father?
Yes.
Yeah.
Well, Michelle, we don't feel pain, right? We
also don't feel
high tolerance for pain, so we don't need any support. We don't need anything or anyone. We don't feel pain.
Nope. Even though we try to manage it the best we could because we've had to for years. However, doesn't mean that it doesn't exist. Right?
Also, husbands and boyfriends know that your women do have a high tolerance of pain, but that doesn't mean ignore it. When Kadeen was suffering from postpartum preeclampsia, I was one of the people who told her, you need to go to the hospital.
Yep, I told him.
I was like, don't hit me with this. You taking a nap and you're gonna take some Tylenol. I think I texted Sakari. I said, Sakari, what do you think? And Sakari was like, nah, bro, she need to go to the hospital. I was like, yo, get up.
That narrative of being the strong black woman hurts us in so many ways. We're used to having to just keep going, that when we need to stop, we don't. And that doesn't help us out. Like, we need sometimes someone else to say, like, yo, you're doing too much, like, sit down. And so that's helpful. And just thinking as a mom, there's so many mental gymnastics that you're juggling in your brain that you don't even have space to think sometimes. Someone else kind of saying, like, look at this from this perspective, kind of remembering what happened at the appointments, what someone said, because you're trying to remember so many different things. Having a backup to kind of remind you of what happened or what you were supposed to be doing, what symptoms you were supposed to be looking for. Very, very important.
Yeah. I can definitely attest to the comparison between not having the father around and now having the father around. Because like I said, I just got married in 2019 and it's a total difference. Oh, even the little things around the house, sometimes we just can't get up in like the first trimester, and him just being able to just wash the dishes, like small things like that. Like this morning, I dozed off, took me my midday nap. Not midday, it was early, and he woke me up with breakfast. I'm like, oh, this is the best. Like, this is the best. And
we need to be loved on during our pregnancies.
Yeah,
he just loves on me.
I mean, picking up a bag forget it. Why didn't you call me to pick up the bags? I'm like, because my first pregnancy, we just assumed that we just supposed to be the strong Black woman. And so I'm picking up, I'm going grocery shopping, doing all of this, and I'm heavy and going grocery shopping and bringing groceries up the stairs. So I'm just like, I'm just used to it. So, but you have to realize that it's okay to let go.
And Layla, that's
it's
so much more of a problem postpartum. Just
really
everything. Yeah.
Really.
To let go and rest.
Yeah.
Yeah.
She had to tell me to take 2 seats when she did our a postpartum visit.
Yes.
My feet were swollen. She was like, that tells me you're on your feet way too much. And you had to take 2 seats, which Sharif was like, sit down. Why are you up? Why are you doing that? Why,
That's my husband. Why are you doing that? Why are you doing this? Sit down, please. He's amazing.
The support
right
needed
there.
postpartum is crucially important, and we want to uplift that as well. When we think about our baby shower gifts, right? The baby is almost always taken care of. Baby gets every single thing they need, but non-traditional things like maybe paying for a housekeeper for someone, paying for a gift card to Uber Eats or DoorDash or something, or doing a meal train for someone, laundry service. These are supports that people need after delivery. Everyone wants to come by and look at the baby. Like that's great, but I'm over here like struggling because I'm sleep deprived. I'm doing too much. I need help. And so people need to think about that as we're building our village. Like it's nice to come see the baby, but come check on mom also. Like make sure she's good. Ask if you can wash the dishes or cook her dinner or whatever else she might need.
I tell everybody to have a bowl, a fish bowl right by the door with little chores written on a piece of paper. Everybody who comes to visit the baby pulls out a chore.
That's
finish that, you get to see the baby.
I like that. I think that
That's
that's fair because you want to be in our space and hold the baby, so at least you can help.
Because holding the baby
on
ain't
your
helping me.
It ain't helping nothing. It ain't helping nothing.
Holding the baby ain't helping me.
I'll say this too. Women have to learn to relinquish things after the baby comes, because Kadena and I had this issue where sleep deprivation was killing her. She's up every 2.5 hours and she doesn't realize how it's affecting her emotionally and psychologically. I walk in the room one day and she's staring at the wall, like just the wall. The TV was off, the light was on, and she was staring at the wall. So I get next to her and I'm looking at the wall too. And I'm like, what happened? And she just looked at me. She was like, I don't know. And I was like, oh, come give me the baby. Then she was like, no, because you don't know what you're doing. And I was like, hey, you have to learn to relinquish a little bit. Let me, if you just let me get the baby and take him to your mom. If you feel more better, she was like, fine, take him to my mom. But then she got like 6 hours of sleep and woke up feeling better. And I understand mom guilt is real. This child has been inside of you for 10 months. Right. That's like your heart walking around with legs and feet. Like you just don't want to see that child with anybody, even the dad. So I get it. But women, I'm telling you, if you learn to relinquish that for a little bit so that you can recoup and get some of that good loving in you, you'll be a better mom. You'll be better for your child. So
that's so true.
And know that we understand. I understand mom guilt is real. And I appreciate her trying to be a super mom, but sometimes I had to be like, yo, I would call Sakari, I'd call her mom and be like, yo, the baby, y'all gotta go get the baby. She's not giving the baby to me. Somebody please, somebody go get the baby because it'll help her a lot. So I hope you guys who are having babies or have new babies learn that it's okay to let the baby
ask for help.
Yeah, it's okay to ask your village for help.
I love that. I want that fishbowl just now.
No, that fishbowl I
did. There's no end limit to it. You have it when you got your food, you have it forever.
Michelle.
I like that one. I do
forever. I did want to go ahead, Kareem.
No, I was just saying, if you come and see the kids, you're gonna clean up that playroom too while you're here.
That's right.
Yeah. I want to get to some of the questions. We had so many questions prepared and we just went on, but I want to address a couple of things. Someone is asking about VBACs. And Nilly, you might want to take that one. If someone's had a previous C-section and now wants to birth via a VBAC, which is a vaginal birth after a C-section, like what are some ways or things people should know about doing that?
That would be me.
First, I would say you would definitely want to research some of the potential risks with VBACs, mostly because this would kind of get you in line with what your provider's thoughts are. And you want to make sure that you're comfortable with those risks. So one of the risks that most providers kind of dread or, supposedly dread, even though the risk of having a uterine rupture are very small, would be uterine ruptures. I know for my particular specialty in home birth, they're not allowed in New Jersey. VBACs are not allowed in New Jersey, but in Pennsylvania and New York, they are. So you also want to kind of maybe even research what is allowed in your home state, depending on where you would like to birth or how you would like to manage your birth. In addition to that, what you're otherwise looking at is a longer labor experience in comparison to someone that has birthed maybe a second or third time, mostly because with a prior cesarean, the expectation or the assumption is that you actually did not labor. Your actual labor did not progress up until, let's say, 8, 9, 10 centimeters. So you are basically brand new in that sense. You are expected to possibly labor somewhere within 18 to 36 hours, which is not necessarily a bad thing. That's something that many first-time moms do experience, but it's something that you yourself need to be mentally, physically, and emotionally prepared for, especially if you would like to go the natural route. So in terms of VBAC, I would say those would be my 3 main points. Research some of the potential complications, also research what is allowed and what route you would like to take. And then also just prepare yourself for the birth and the labor that comes with a VBAC.
Now, if you've had a C-section once, is that automatic that you have to have another C-section again?
No.
No.
I just wanted to add a couple of things to that as well. Most people always say, I want a VBAC, I want a VBAC. But what you're really looking for is a TOLAC. You're looking for a trial of labor after cesarean, right? Because there's no guarantee you're going to get the vaginal birth. It may end up being a cesarean. So you want the access to the trial of labor. That's what you should be discussing with your provider is a TOLAC, TOLAC. The other thing that you want to look at is what is the time period between those 2 babies? When was your cesarean and when are you pregnant again? The ideal time is to be at least 18 months between. You want to give that uterus some time to heal after that cesarean section before you can attempt this trial of labor. So those are some other important things to talk about. Looking for VBAC friendly physicians as well, checking when you're doing your interviews. Maybe the person that you had your cesarean section with may not be the person that you are going to do your VBAC with, because whatever reasons led to the cesarean may be the same thing that they're going to do with regard to the second time around. So really finding practitioners who are interested in assisting you in achieving that goal. Knowing that if you are in New Jersey, because the birth center of New Jersey has an OB/GYN there, she does allow VBACs in the birth center. If you've had a previous vaginal birth. So if you've had a proven cervix, right? So this is technically your 3rd baby, right? That you're coming in for a vaginal birth after cesarean, that you can do that if one of those children previously was able to do so.
So short answer is one C-section is not an automatic that you need to have another one. Most doctors will tell you that because they don't want to do the VBAC. It is not because you cannot. So you want to do your due diligence of finding a provider who is going to be willing to do it for you and has the training. And then of course, as everyone mentioned, the education. There's a question for Sakari about your role in the birth with your sister's delivery. Do you want to just highlight what your experience was as a nurse in that scenario and a family member?
Sure. So I think I was more involved in the second birth because I actually assumed the role as RN. It was just the midwife and myself in terms of healthcare professionals taking over the process. So I was very hands-on. I did a lot of vital checks. I was actually able to actually check her cervix as well. I did a lot of Doppler checks for the baby's heart rate. But where I really stepped in was after the birth. Due to the water being so hot and the environment being so hot, and I think her just being so stressed, her blood pressure started to go low, and her heart rate started to get really high. And me as an ER nurse, those are symptoms for me. So I was very aware of that because I was checking her vital signs very often. So I was able to put my skills to use. I started an IV, I got a bolus running, and I was able to bring her blood pressure up and make her feel better in that moment. And I think it was it was very like crazy to me because it's like I really was not a sister in that moment. I did not have anything related to a sister. I was literally saw her as a patient, and I was able to treat her as such and pretty much help her get back to great health. So that was definitely a big experience with me in terms of that birthing process.
I love that. There's a question about when you should get a doula. When should you begin to look for one during your pregnancy?
ASAP. Okay. Mad early. You want to establish that relationship as early as possible, particularly if your doula is providing you childbirth education. You want to be able to get into her classes and understand, you know, what's going on. You may want to have conversations with her after your prenatal visits, right? So she can sit down with you and go, okay, you went to the doctor. What happened? Let's talk about it. Like, let's go over here, and then here are some additional questions for you to ask the next time you go, right? So understanding informed consent, all of those things can be built out throughout the entire relationship. You don't want to wait too late in the game, particularly individuals who are experienced doulas are fully booked, usually months in advance. So, you know, you may end up finding a doula, right, who is available 2 weeks before your due date. You want to know, why is that person available 2 weeks before your due date? Right? So really kind of focusing on just, you know, building that relationship because they're part of your team. You're inviting this person, and you want to interview as many people as you can too, because you want to have a great relationship with that person and you want to feel comfortable with them. You're inviting them into your workspace.
Absolutely. There's a question about breastfeeding classes, and I will answer that as a lactation consultant. You should begin taking breastfeeding classes somewhere around 32 weeks. Usually in your third trimester is when you will have the best time to take the class, just for retention. It's a lot of information that you want to learn, but you definitely want to do it during your pregnancy early on, because in the event that you go into preterm labor, you don't want to then have to struggle without knowing the ins and outs of how to get things up and going. So the earlier you can take it, somewhere around 32 weeks is good. There is a question about home births. So like, what does that look like for an individual? If anyone wants to share either personal or professional experience of what a home birth actually looks like if someone's seeking to have one.
Home birth is amazing. Absolutely peaceful and calm, and there's less hyperbole. I think we didn't touch on the differences between high risk and low risk, and who is a great candidate for home birth. Home birth and birth center births are not for everyone, right? If you have pregnancy in and of itself is not an illness. But if you have any other pregnancy conditions surrounding that, that pregnancy, then you may not be a great candidate for home birth or birth center birth. So let's just throw that out there. But yes, absolutely empowered, peaceful. The process is, you know, setting things up with your midwife, your team, if you have a doula or not, and really just kind of strategizing like how your dream birth is going to be, whether it's land or water. You know, you get to decide, you get to make all of those decisions. And I'm going to leave this to Layla because she's about to set up her own home birth right now.
You're still on mute, Mama. There you go.
Yeah, I realize that. Um, so all right, so what was the question exactly? Because I know
What should someone expect if they're going to do a home birth? What is it like? Or what have you learned in your journey thus far about home births?
I I have a ton of education on home birth thanks to Millie. I mean, you want to make sure that your midwife, first of all, you want to find a midwife that you're comfortable with. And I actually interviewed, they didn't know I was interviewing them, but I was interviewing like several of them. And I chose Millie. For one, I was looking for a Black woman. I'm just going to be honest.
Mhm.
And there were a few, but because of COVID, no one was doing home births. And Millie agreed to do a home birth, and so I was ecstatic about that. But then Millie had a ton of information for me, always available, accessible, which is something that I just didn't, I didn't see or experience with my GYN. Not to say that I had a poor experience with my GYN, but it just wasn't as personable, like I said earlier. But with Millie, she's the total opposite. She's always available. She's always accessible. Those are things that I was looking for. Those are things that a mother, expecting mother, should definitely look for, someone who they can reach out to and ask a ton of questions, because this information is just we it's privy to us, but it's not something that we talk about all the time. So you want to make sure that your midwife is very educational and check her experience. I know someone said check your credentials. My biggest thing is experience. Credentials are very important, but it doesn't mean anything if you only delivered to a court two babies. I don't care what degrees you have or certifications. If you only caught two babies, I'm a wait. Not for me. So Millie has the experience. She's certified, but just make sure that you have someone who's knowledgeable and who can also share with you the risk. Like she speak of often on this call, she always lets her patients or her moms know what to expect, and what the risks are and what she would do in these situations. That's what I like. Um, so yeah, I'm expecting to be comfortable in my own home. I have a great support system. I'm expecting, my brothers are like, no, we're not doing it. But my mom was like, oh, you will. They don't have a choice. So we're developing, we're getting things ready for the house right now because I'm 26 weeks. So we're
Okay.
in the process of getting things ready for the baby to come.
You jumped on everything early. We've gone a little bit over time, and I know there are a number of questions that we did not get to answer. What I will ask is that if we did not get to your question, that you email me. I will put my email in the chat, and we will try to get the answers to you. This is so much content and information that we might need to do a part 2 to this to really get to some of the things that we didn't have an opportunity to get to. We will be running webinars like this often, so there will be more opportunities to learn and to share. So just please provide me with your email, and I will try to get an answer back to you. So I want to close us off. Does anyone have any final thoughts of things that we didn't get to talk about that you feel is really important before we close?
I just wanted to add one thing that came up during my child's birth education class that I'm really happy did. And just putting it out there for other folks who may have been survivors of sexual assault, and some things might come up for you during your pregnancy and delivery that are unexpected, which kind of came up for me, particularly around vaginal exams and consent. Like, doctors breaking your bag of waters, or, without your consent, and giving you unnecessary vaginal exams. And through talking with Michelle and additionally with my providers after, they all knew, they were sort of all on high alert after that to ask, explain why a vaginal exam was required, et cetera, et cetera. And this is something I had no idea I needed to know before I needed to know it. I was just triggered in the moment about that and broke down, and then some support had to happen, right? So for anyone else who may be in that scenario, I just want to say, you know, they ain't got to do all the vaginal exams.
Yep, and you can say no.
And you can say no. And there are many stages to giving consent. And that was really important for me to know. Again, I feel like a broken record saying being empowered was really vital, but to say no, like if this is not medically necessary and now I have the information to know it's not, you don't need to do that vaginal exam. So I just wanted to add that for folks who might be in that situation. So.
Thank you. And we didn't get to spend much time on consent, but it is a very important process that people understand what consent is. Consent is not, I'm going to rupture your bag now, okay? That's not consent. Consent is an explanation of the entire thing that includes the risks, the benefits, alternatives, all of those things. And so you do have the right to refuse if there's something that you don't feel comfortable with or that you need further explanation on. You have the right to ask those questions and to decline to have things done to you that you don't want done to you, though that is absolutely your right. Any other closing thoughts? Anyone want to add anything?
I don't know if this was brought up, but make sure that you are in contact with your healthcare provider in every aspect, because what you don't want to happen, which would happen to Kadeen and I, after we had Kaz, our healthcare provider told us that they were not going to cover our midwife because we had babies close to 15 months apart. And at that point, it was considered a luxury. And I was like, are you serious?
Wow.
And it's not fair to the midwife if we didn't have the means to pay out of pocket.
Right.
And she would have had to wait for payment. We're talking about someone's profession here. So if you're deciding to do a home birth, or even if going to a birthing center, or even having a child in the hospital, make sure that your healthcare provider is going to cover all of the costs that are needed to have a child, because that was something that caught us off guard. So just make sure that you're in constant contact with your healthcare provider.
Yeah, insurance is tricky, and they find ways to get out of paying for things that they should be paying for consistently. And that is a broken system that needs to be addressed. But I would, we didn't get to talk about the finances too much, but utilize your health saving accounts at your jobs. If you have that option, you can use those funds to pay for those services, pay for things early if you can. Plan it, like if you're have the ability to financially plan for those things. And if you can get family to give donations to help cover, if you really want to have a doula and you can't afford it, as I mentioned, there's that community doula option. If you want a midwife and can't afford it, see if you can raise the funds within your family. So instead of having, some things that maybe you don't need, we buy so many things for the baby that they don't ever need or use, and it ends up getting donated anyway. Ask for those things to be paid for. Put a fund together for those things that are important for you, so that you have access to the funds to pay for them so that you can have what you want. Michelle, did you have something you wanted to add? I see you're off mute.
No, you just answered it.
Okay.
The baby shower, I was just saying, while you're doing the questions or just kind of closing out, I want to have like just a little slideshow in the background to show everybody what birth options look like.
I just had one thing to say briefly. I think something that's really critical to explain to families that are looking to birth, period, regardless of your delivery method, whether it be cesarean or vaginal, regardless of your delivery setting, be it home, birth center, or hospital. Something that's really critical for us, especially as midwives, is that society take more pay more attention to your health overall, preconception. So preconception, you should really consider, your lifestyle changes, if any, that might be necessary to have the ideal delivery that you would like. In addition to that, any dietary changes that could help or benefit your health, even if it's temporary, but you know what? It only takes 60 days to make it permanent. So you might end up with a much better health overall postpartum, just as a result of these changes that you went ahead and made. So definitely consider that. You're not necessarily pregnant day one. You're pregnant up to 60 months to a few years even before the actual conception takes place. So I can say for myself, before my first delivery, I lost 150 pounds. right? I lost 150 pounds because I didn't want to be a statistic. I didn't want to be one of those moms that ended up preeclamptic with gestational diabetes, etc. I actually lost an aunt who developed gestational diabetes and retained the diabetic state postpartum. So these are just some things that I myself am definitely an advocate for. It's just overall better health within our communities. It's something that we don't talk about very often.
Thank you for elevating that. Such an important point. I want you guys to take a look at these birthing options. Please understand what your choices are. I want to thank our amazing panelists for their input and sharing their expertise with all of you today. This is just the beginning. Our organization does Black Maternal Health Week all year. We are a Black-led organization. This is the work that we do. We don't just honor and celebrate it during this week. This is the work that we do all year round. So please make sure that you are connected from a community's perspective to your local community-based organizations who are entrenched in this work, who are Black-led. And I want to just elevate the fact that there are many people who take advantage of this week, and they have absolutely no desire to really make a difference in this work. It's just something to tag their name to. So please do look at people who are actually doing the work, not just talking about the work they do, but they are actually in the community doing it and making a difference. So again, I want to thank our panelists for their input today and sharing their experiences and their transparency and their lived experiences of their births. Tomorrow, we will be having a presentation which is called Fathers of the Movement. These are fathers who have experienced a loss due to a perinatal pregnancy-related complication. And so you can find information about that on our Instagram page and tune into that tomorrow at 12 p.m. I want to thank you all for staying on with us. I know we went a little bit over. Thank you so much for your time and your continued support. And we look to see you at our next event. Thank you.
See you next time.
Thank
Bye,
you.
everyone.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.